Welcome to Leadership Coaching. Each week, we explore fresh topics inspired by our coaching clients
and our guests to discover the essence of effective leadership. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Leadership Podcast with my co-host, Bill Tierney, and myself, Martin Kettle. And we have a very special guest with us today. We're excited to talk to Islena Faircrest.
Islena.
Islena Faircrest. Oh, gosh.
We're just going to leave that in.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah. Sorry. Islena Faircrest. As beautiful a name as she is herself.
Thank you.
Let me just tell the audience a little bit about you. Islena is a somatic therapist and yoga educator and has been for the last 24 years. She's a trauma-informed IFS-trained practitioner. She facilitates learning secure attachment in relationships, repairing attachment injury, and helping individuals and families in their healing journey towards empowered living. She's a mother of 2 young adult sons, a former doula and prenatal educator, and for 24 years, she's taught yoga, teacher trainings, retreats, and workshops to the U.S., Canada, Australia, and Costa Rica. So this is who we get to talk to today.
All right.
So great to be here with you. Thank you. My younger parts were listening to all that going, wow, really?
I want to know her.
Yeah, like sounds interesting. Let's pay attention.
So Marty already knows this, but let me kind of give my own personal introduction as well. So Islena and I have been working in a group called Parts Work Practice, supporting people that are interested in learning about the internal family systems model. And the most frequently repeated contact that she and I have are in writing a parts guidebook for people that are interested in learning how to practice the IFS model. And that should be published sometime this year. So Islena and I have gotten to know each other in thick and thin.
Yeah.
Some thin and some thick. So welcome, Islena.
Thanks so much, Bill. Yeah. Like a true family, right?
Yes,
Thick and
exactly.
thin. Yeah,
Yeah.
like a true family. Yeah. Love that. It's good to be here with you guys and just share and wax poetic on our work together and kind of my love relationship really with IFS. I really am experiencing now after practicing it in my system, I guess the last 5 years or so, how it is a spiritual practice. And it has kind of really married well with my yoga teaching practice and my yoga educating practice. It's such a beautiful modality. I do notice I come from the lens of internal family systems more and more now, that it's just becoming more embodied and kind of just my lifestyle in terms of how I, view and experience the world and how my system does. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Say a little bit about so some of our listeners are in IFS and what are associated with it. Some of them are not. And same thing, some of them do yoga and some of them don't. So
exactly.
If you wouldn't mind, just bring us into that spiritual space a little bit. Like, how is it that IFS and yoga bring anything to do with spirituality?
Great question. Well, I first started teaching yoga 24 years ago. How I remember that number is it's exactly how old my younger son is. And I first learned it as a child in elementary school in grade 1. My grade 1 teacher was this beautiful woman, a hippie, who shared the love of the Beatles and yoga with her elementary school students.
Yeah.
And so I learned sun salutations, and I remember like, here comes the sun, da 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 da, doing sun salutations, and I loved it. I loved all the animal postures. that we would do and just have fun, bark like a dog, kick like a donkey. And as a 6-year-old, this was just the cat's meow. It was so fun. And then I went into dance growing up and kind of forgot about yoga. And then when I was pregnant with my second child, as fast forward to being an adult, I remembered my yoga practice and I was wanting to reconnect back to my body after, giving birth to a child who was 2 years at that time, 2 years old. And in that learning, at first it was kind of like physical caretaking of my body, this kind of vessel as I'm pregnant. And then it became, over the years, kind of like a friend to be with during the challenges as a practice to kind of maintain my connection with the world and connection with me. So when I learned internal family systems, fast forward again a few years later to let me see, about 6-ish years ago, it was that familiar, like, oh, here is a practice that helps me be in relationship with myself better.
Mhm.
It not only helps me understand all these different aspects of myself in the yoga, in the beginning, it was the physical aspects of myself, and internal family systems in the beginning of my learning, it was understanding that I have this internal family, literally, of different aspects. Some of some of them behave this way, some of them behave that way, some of them believe this, some of them think that. And depending on which aspect I'm influenced by will kind of impact how I show up in the world. So that's how it became like a spiritual practice in the sense of it helped bring awareness to the way I showed up and how I relate with other people, people I
Mhm.
love, new people, even nature, how I relate with nature. Am I regulating with nature? Even how I relate with my dog and circumstances as well. So I can say that um, these two areas, although they're quite different, they helped me be in relationship with myself. And that feels like a really big spiritual practice, just being in relationship with ourselves as we evolve over time, as we evolve through experiences.
That's beautiful. I don't think that some of the people that I know who kind of poo-poo spirituality recognize that when they're in relationships with themselves, because everybody is, maybe not to their benefit, but everybody is, that's a spirit,
Yes,
that's there, that you are in connection with yourself through spirit.
exactly.
So thanks for bringing that out. That's
I
great.
love I love the story, Islena, of being in the first grade with your hippie teacher, listening to the Beatles and learning yoga through the animal different postures.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear more of your story, and ultimately, somewhere in today's conversation, I'd really also like to hear from you as an IFS practitioner how you see the relationship between self leadership, having that relationship with yourself and being able to provide that leadership, the
Mm.
relationship between that and leadership in the world, corporations, governments, families, communities. So if you could, I'd love to just open it up for you to tell us as much as you'd like us to know about your story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Just let you take.
Yeah, thank you. When it comes to self leadership, I can say that internal family systems as a system really helped me understand how protector led my system was. And what that means is the parts of me that kind of um, learned to perform and learned to do well and excel all the way from, being good in school, getting good grades to performing well in dance because I grew up doing dance and also performing well for my parents, especially my mom, bless her, who's a tiger mom. Tiger moms are intense. And the children of tiger moms learn to please. They learn to people please. It becomes their language of existence, actually. And that was really predominantly my language of existence growing up, was people pleasing. So I really thought that's who I was my entire life, until I learned about internal family systems, helping me see through a lens that, oh my goodness, those are my compensating parts to protect vulnerable parts in my psyche that experienced real, lived, adverse. And I think it was around, I think it was eight-ish years ago, I took the ACE test, which is the Adverse Childhood Experiences test. And I was shocked. Like, I was genuinely shocked when I discovered my score was a 7 out of 10. And that's a test you can find online, by the way, for those of you that are interested. And I was like, whoa, really? Because a lot of us are like, oh, I didn't experience this much, that much, blah, blah, blah. A lot of us don't remember necessarily. And just a quick little thing about the ACE test, it doesn't even include like lived trauma like racism or homophobia. It doesn't, because it's an older test, right? So it didn't really include those. But taking that test helped me see, it just helped me normalize that the degree of trauma that I had experienced and not yet processed. So it helped me kind of get the help that would really help my system understand itself better. That honestly created the most, I would call it, sustainable and functional leadership that I've ever experienced in my system, because it's coming from a really grounded place of knowing myself and my history and understanding why my behaviors were a certain way, versus the kind of leadership that I used to have when I was a young adult of like push through, do really well, get excellent grades. I wouldn't say that my parts were perfectionistic, but they were very performance orientated. And so a lot of my life force energy was like reviewing and always scanning, right? Is the performance good enough, right? Versus like really being in relationship with what was happening inside. Because when you're in relationship with what's happening inside, you can see the needs of others better as well. Because as you're tending to your own needs, you can recognize what are the needs of others, which is really, effective leadership at its core. So I hope that kind of summarizes, in a nutshell, what IFS helped me in expanding my leadership. My leadership was already there. I was in high school, and right after high school, I was in a band. I was in music, and I remember having a lot of like fun with my friends and kind of naturally leading social situations. But upon reflection, I can see how much of that was performative, right? And now it's more like, oh, I can actually attune to the needs of others and kind of spidey senses. Sometimes that helps us serve better.
The light has moved instantly.
I just noticed that.
I love that. I love that you're pointing to this relationship between relating to ourselves powerfully, leading our own lives from that place, and that prepares us. And I'd love to hear more of your perspective on how it prepares us to be in powerful leadership with others. That's a great point, because so much of the time, the literature and the workshops that we see about leadership, it's like, go get some of this talent or implement this tool. It's all external stuff.
Exactly.
Rarely is it about how your leadership with others comes from your relationship to yourself. And one of the ways I'm going to throw out, but I'm sure you've got a lot more to say about this, is that when I'm in, let's just call it loving relationship with my parts, then I'm more available. Like if I'm all up here about performance or people pleasing or on the negative side, guilt and anxiety, then there's very little room to hear what's going on with anybody else. So that's one of the
Exactly.
things that I see. What else?
I think you said it beautifully, Marty. It's again with the IFS lens, I can see that a lot of leadership is very performative and coming from protector parts that are burdened with managing.
Yeah.
Managing. And management in that sense is very tiring.
Mhm.
It's like you're corralling, wild horses, herding cats, all of that. It's very exhausting. And there's not a lot of connection. My cousins are into natural horsemanship. And the difference between old school horsemanship and natural horsemanship is old school horsemanship is beat them into submission. The term literally is, I think the term is green breaking, which means you break them into their wearing a saddle through kind of breaking the will. And I'm not saying that's what leadership does. It's just that there's a disconnect with your other nervous system that you're interacting with. Whereas the natural horsemanship, I'm just using it as an example here, micro example, is that you're attuning to the other nervous system. And when there's that space to attune, you can sense the needs better. And if you're also connected inside yourself with your own needs and noticing what arises and just what's there, while simultaneously noticing the other nervous systems, the language and the ability to respond to what's needed is just coming from a place of service versus like worrying about how you're going to perform. It's like worrying about how you show up doesn't even occur when you're in that energy of attunement.
Right.
It may, and there's nothing wrong with that if it shows up, because our parts are going to show up all the time, just depending on what activates them, and that's fine. But if we have awareness of it, then it's like we can kind of flow in and out. Yeah.
A great example, this is just an aside, but the great example of the old kind is displayed in that Netflix series Yellowstone.
Oh, I haven't watched it, but I've heard good things.
Oh my God. Well, that's the way he breaks in horses, and that's the way he leads too.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's
Very cool.
that's a great bad example.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it feels like the difference between dominating and controlling. Why? Because of fear. And then attuning, which naturally helps to, when we attune, it gives us the space to address whatever fears may be there, if they are even there at all. Yeah.
Lovely. Beautiful.
I'm over here trying to think of the name of the, I believe it was a streaming series, where there's another example of breaking in horses.
Oh, yeah.
And it's the latter. It's the loving approach, where the relationship between the person and the horse eventually volunteers from a space of, it appears, of trust and safety, and volunteers its services rather than becomes dominated by the cowboy.
Oh, I love that.
Personal quick share. The weekend of 9/11, I was supposed to be I was living in San Diego. I was supposed to be in Colorado, but I couldn't fly because all the planes were downed, right? Nobody was to fly. We didn't know what was going to happen with planes during them. And so I jumped in my little jalopy of a car, and I drove over the mountains to Colorado for a equestrian workshop.
Oh, wow.
And it was this latter kind. I'd never experienced anything like it. I had only been on these, sort of, everybody gets on a horse and goes walking through the woods together, and you come back and you don't really learn anything. But this was a very interesting workshop. It was the first time I was introduced to, that attuning with
Yeah.
another being in such a subtle and yet profound way. And here it was that the world was, in a frenzy about
Yeah.
9/11 at the same time as I'm like getting into this chill enough place to be able to commune with this horse. It was fascinating. So that's just a personal story.
Well, to expand on that, I didn't realize I would be speaking about horses, but I love them so much. My childhood parts, like, we're obsessed with horses. To speak to Bill's point on safety, being led with safety, the horse volunteered its services because it felt safe. Um, I ironically next month I'm going to Costa Rica to help lead a retreat that is doing equine therapy, utilizing equine therapy, and horses are a prey animal. Their neurological wiring is to scan the environment for predators, the threat of predators. So a horse will naturally, their hypervigilance is pretty much on all the time, like most prey animals are. And they're a big prey animal, so they're, nice and tasty to the predator. So it's when the safety is felt as a felt sense for a prey animal, that's when the magic happens. And that's why they're so amazing as therapy animals, because they reflect back to us our own hypervigilance. Living in this modern world, the majority of us are in hypervigilance pretty much all the time. Most of us are disconnected, and it requires effort to feel connection. We're just that post-industrial society, we're just very disconnected. So it does require cultivations of spaces like this to feel connection.
Yeah.
I want to share some of how I'm listening here today. Something I began this morning because I have a deadline is to prepare a presentation for a summit that I'm going to be doing. And the summit's called Inner Peace, Outer Impact. And I'll be talking more about that in the near weeks. But in the meantime, I just began this morning to put together a presentation that will be organized around IFS and self-leadership in business. So that's called the self-led business. So I'm listening through that lens. And I'm getting a lot, I got to tell you. I'm getting a lot from this conversation.
That is so cool.
And Marty, if you don't have anything pressing right now, I'll just make a couple of points and maybe ask a couple of questions. Okay. All right. Language of existence. Never heard that term before. Is that something you that just came and generated from your conversation today, or is that language that you use with your clients or have read somewhere?
It is. I don't use that term with clients, but it is I guess you could say what's the word? Like a construct. It's a model that I use. Because what is the language of the state of that part? What's the kind of language? What is its worldview? Right?
Yeah.
Of that aspect of our psyche. What is its worldview? It had very real lived experiences that creates its language and perceptions of the world.
Okay.
Makes sense. And as you know, Islena, and I think you don't know this too, Marty, and I'm saying it that way because Marty acknowledges he hasn't been trained in the IFS model, but hanging around me for the last year and a half or two, talking about IFS has gotten in him so much that he now shares this same lens. And we
cool.
understand that parts do what parts do because it makes sense for them to do it.
Exactly.
So when I hear you say, what is the language of existence for this part? That's really what you're pointing at is why does it make sense that the part does what it does? It's because of what it is needed to do in order to continue to exist and support me, if it's my part, to continue to exist, to survive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Another just a little sidebar. I will not allow myself to go on a rant here, but I just say that there's a similar phrase called The 5 Love Languages. It's the name of a book. And I got to just say, if I haven't said it already, I really don't align with the 5 love languages. It
Oh,
feels
really?
like manipulation to me. It feels like a strategy for
Ah,
survival. How do I get you to love me?
ah,
How do
right.
I show you that I love you? So you're talking about
Ah,
a completely different concept here. You're talking about the language of existence, which is about
mhm.
survival, and
Yep,
maybe identifying a particular language of love that someone would then respond well to is another survival strategy that a
true,
part might employ. Okay.
true. Yep. I'll add one piece to that too, is that I've noticed that different aspects of our psyche that are in different developmental stages. So let's say like the young adult compared to like the toddler aspects of my psyche, um, will have very different languages. And the younger parts of me, most of their ways of coping with the world were nonverbal. So that language is a body language. It's a somatic language. It's not words. It's the sensations in the body. The flushing in the cheeks for me is the most common one. The constrictions in the throat for many people, tightening in the belly, tightening in the chest, shoulders hunch up to the ears, bracing for impact. Kind of like alarm is up in the system and the body responds to the threat. That's the language. Yeah, nonverbal.
Would you like to elevate your leadership? Be sure to pick up my new book, Leadership as Relation, to explore leading by empowering others. Now back to the episode.
As you're explaining that, I notice what you're doing with your hands, how you
Yeah.
position your body, and of course I've noticed this before. But I've never really gotten into it very much. Like maybe the thought that came to me as you were explaining that is that the somatic language of that's pre-verbal may be where this has evolved from. That the use of my hands to express as I'm verbally
Mhm.
speaking something may have evolved from that very early somatic language.
I would say so. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll add to that too, because I started dancing pretty young. I think I was about 3 when my mom put me into dance.
Mm.
So,
Tiger mom.
pardon me?
Tiger mom.
Yeah, my tiger mom.
Mhm.
Bless my tiger mom. She had me learn performative language very early. So my son actually has told me this. My youngest son has told me, like, Mom, you need to go into theater because your body language is so like over the top. He's like, you're hilarious. I'm like, really? Because I don't find myself to be hilarious, but he gets a lot of pleasure and humor from watching my body language because it's very expressive apparently and very over the top. So as you're saying that, literally, I can see how this became the language of my younger parts, expressing through hands and like, um, well, again, performative makes sense for my system,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. 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 Well, and notice facial expressions too. There's
Yeah,
so much communicated with our facial expressions.
yeah.
A good, I think, a really great example of that is that I don't trust someone whose eyes don't smile when their lips do.
Ah, interesting. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a mixed message, and I feel
right.
guarded when that happens.
Yeah.
How do you even do that? That sounds hard to do.
It looks like this.
Oh,
Notice that my eyes didn't smile there.
yeah, I see.
There's
Hmm.
no joy in that. It's a manipulation.
Hmm.
There's a
That's what it feels like.
guardedness.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Well, and just to get back to the primitivity of this,
Mm,
like there are people that have no training in noticing this, and but like they will show you that they're in control by like doing one of these, or sitting in a certain place in the room so that they got the biggest, the widest view. There are all kinds of subtle, or you know um to lean in,
uh-huh. Yep.
all these and they're not trained to do these things. It just comes from our DNA.
Exactly. They're not
Yeah.
conscious. I've had it pointed out that when I cross my arms, I'm guarding. I want to argue with that. Like, no, I'm not. I'm just, that feels more comfortable. Well, it feels more comfortable because maybe I feel like I need to guard myself. And
Yeah.
I do. Well, I'll relax into this position every once in a while, but I'm not consciously aware that what I'm doing is communicating to you that I'm in control. It just feels like the comfortable, relaxing thing to do. And yet I'm open to the possibility that there are parts of me that would feel more comfortable if I just showed you how big I am with me.
Oh, that's great. That also speaks like to the sometimes natural expressions of the masculine and the feminine, right? Like as soon as you did that, I'm like, oh, there's Bill's masculine, and there's no wrong in it. It's just like, and just also with the stories that you shared with me, Bill, over the years, I can just recognize the parts of you that like to do that, and there's no wrong in it, right? And we just, yeah,
That's
every
another
moment.
wonderful thing about IFS
Yeah.
is there's no wrong in it. Again, it goes back to what we do makes sense somehow. Even if we don't understand how it makes sense, we can understand if we can get curious and ask.
Yes.
And I wonder if that also translates into leadership in the world. One of the things that I wrote down here is we're talking about the qualities of self-led leadership. And I don't know that I put those words together before either. Self-led leadership.
Really?
Self-led leadership. I have self-leadership, yes. That just means leading from self in my own internal world. But self-led leadership, I just, in my own mind, I've never put those words together and thought about it in that way.
Yeah. Well, I love it. I love the energy of it.
Yeah.
Well, it goes back to our earlier conversation, at least the way I'm understanding it, about the leading from that connection to self, right?
Yes.
As opposed to leading from, I don't know, some technique or a power or hierarchy or a power structure or something like that.
Yep. Well, technique again goes back to performance, because why do we learn these techniques? To improve our performance, really.
Right. So sometimes it is most effective and it probably appropriate to employ a technique, right? And if that's, coming from a self-led place, yes.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I would say that the technique, if it's coming from internal connection, then we're just marrying really great worlds together.
Right.
And it's not about whether the technique is a right thing to do or a wrong thing to do. It's more about, is it effective, and what's its intent?
A cousin of mine was on a trip on a safari in Africa recently. And she sent me this little video clip. It's all of maybe 3 minutes, where they're in a boat and they're following an elephant who's, like up to his haunches in the water down this path through the reeds. And they, they're fascinated. They want to get up close. They're following the elephant. And the elephant is trying to get away in the water. It's slow going because she's deep in the water. And finally, the elephant just turns around and faces them head on and opens his ears up wide and, wails, that honk, that screaming that they do. I don't know how to describe it. And they turned around and went the other way.
They got the message.
Yeah. Right? That was probably self-led. Elephants are very intelligent beings. And the technique he was using to get away wasn't working. And so he or she turned around and, used a well-considered technique.
Yeah.
And I love that you would call that self-led. In the IFS community, sometimes we think, well, self is going to be gentle and kind and soft and loving, but not always. Sometimes we might be that elephant.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean it's a part that's operating from the past. That elephant was acting in the moment, irritated because here it is working way too hard to try to get downstream because he doesn't trust who's following it.
Yeah.
Probably. Sometimes it takes a louder voice. Sometimes it does take being assertive. Like, no,
Exactly.
that will not happen here. So
Yeah.
but I want to go back to you, Islena. So with so much of what you shared, I could go on for the next few hours just touching on the points that I wrote down from here, like you bringing up the ACE test. I
Uh-huh.
love that you brought that up. That's so important to look at.
Mm-hmm.
One more thing I'll just comment on. As I'm making notes about what is self-led leadership,
Mm-hmm.
what I'm learning from you is self-led leadership involves trust, which means that the leader is responsible for generating some environment of safety so that there's no dominance, there's no control and dominance, and there's no
Yeah.
shaming, which is one aspect of control and dominance.
Huge. Yeah. And where that really comes from is attunement.
Yes.
And attunement is a skill that we can learn. And the practice of it really is noticing and becoming aware of what's there. And this is where modalities like internal family systems are so good at helping us learn, okay, what's up right now? Let's pay attention to the qualities of the energy of what's up right now. And the best place to start is what's inside of ourselves. And so as we get more intimate and more connected and developing better relationships with the microcosm inside, it's just reflected out on the outside anyhow. So what we get to know really well inside, we're going to recognize and understand better on what happens on the outside. And so it's just kind of this simultaneous ability to be with what's inside, recognize it on the outside, be with what's outside, recognize it on the inside. And from that place, you can lead. And it's not really about leading anymore. It's just more about witnessing and being with what's there and just providing what's needed in the moment because you're attuned.
Mm-hmm. I'm watching you, Marty, as we hear this from Islena, because concurrently listening to Marty's book, Leadership as Relation. And by the way, what I was listening to this morning, Marty, was the chapter written by Money, which is very enjoyable. I'm finding it just so much joy as I listen to your voice and speaking as and for money. So nice. So
that's cool
to hear. But as Islena shared that just now, that attunement, and when she said it's not about leading at that point, I saw something happen for you. So it's like something clicked for you there, Marty. What was that?
Well, that is where I want to take the reader in my book too. Is it's about being in relation, being attuned. I love this word because I'm a musician too, and so yeah, it's like the whole old institution or structure of leadership, like it falls away, and we're just in tune. And I mean, like it made me think with the thought that occurred to me when you said that, and this might be what you're picking up on, Bill, was that this is the way Indigenous people live in relationship to their environment. They're not leading a campaign to do anything about the environment. They're in attunement with.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, well said.
During this pause, I'm looking down at my notes here. Loving relationship with my parts, Marty. That was a comment that you made. Mm-hmm. Another aspect of self-led leadership is recognizing the needs of others. And maybe, Islena, you can talk a little bit about, from your experience, either in your life or with your clients, or maybe a combination of both, about what gets in the way of recognizing the needs of others.
Great question. What gets in the way in recognizing the needs of others? Well, the first thing that comes up in my system is when I haven't recognized my own need. That is what gets in the way the most for my system, to be with the needs of others. Because it's quite possible that I won't be able to meet the need of the other if I'm not addressing my unmet need first. And it's not a tit for tat. It's just more of like, okay, this is about capacity. And if my unmet need is quite strong in a certain area, my system might just not have the capacity for the other, in which case another person, another nervous system will be better for them versus mine. in that moment. And that's okay, because we don't have to be everything to everyone. And it's impossible to anyhow. So there's different kinds of leaders, and it really boils down to what I guess pings our soul the most. I'm not in corporate leadership. I would suck at corporate leadership. And I have really close friends that are amazing at corporate leadership because it's what pings their soul, because there's no wrong area for what pings your soul. But if we have attunement with what our actual priorities are, like authentically, not what we've been injected with by society or our family of origin or upbringing, if we're in tune with what really pings our soul, we'll be able to attune to, which, in this case equals the leadership we're talking about, and be able to serve. Because there's a willingness on our side. Our nervous system is like, yeah, it's open. The doors open up. And where my doors close, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just not meant to be a leader in that area. I'm not meant to attune in that area because I have some unmet needs to tend to in my own system first. And maybe I'll never be in that area. And that's totally fine too. Like, we all have our specialty, I guess you could say, and our niche. And like, we're not for everyone. And so kind of surrendering into that gives us permission to show up better in our area of strength.
Can I don't want to interrupt your flow, Bill, but I'm just thinking of a client of mine who I don't think he recognizes what his real needs are. He'll say, well, I need some peace and quiet. So I go home and I smoke a cigar and watch TV. I'm like, that's not going to give you peace and quiet. Right. But I think there are, and I'm sure I do this in many ways as well, that we don't recognize what our real needs are. And in contrast, I was thinking as you were talking about people like Mother Teresa, Saint Gandhi, or Saint Francis of Assisi, like they were totally there for others. That's why we call them saints.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they didn't have to have a house. They didn't have to have a boat. They didn't even have to have a paying job. But their needs were met because they recognized the real need, right? So
real for their system, I would say. Yeah. What's real for their system. I'll share that Mother Teresa fascinated me for a little while there. So when I learned about her, I learned that she, I think the dark night of the soul might even have been coined with her experiences, because she had such spiritual pain from her own personal experience of not having a relationship with God directly. She had a relationship with him, as she describes it, of service, but her actual relational relationship, hence she experienced a dark night of the soul, because in this amazing service she provided the world, she felt an absence of God's presence, in her words, in her description. And so like, again, going back to people's individual systems, I'll speak from my experience. Where I lead best is where I experienced the most unmet needs, ironically. And this, like, going back to my ACE test, what I experienced missing the most growing up, and nurturing, is actually, ironically, through my own work, where I lead best now, because it's where I have a lot of energy to show up, because it matters so much to me, right? Because in my own experience, I have this unmet need. My system did, and I've learned to recognize it. I've learned to kind of attune to it, reparent it, all the things that we do in the personal development and spiritual growth world. And that's where I'm most passionate, to help others, because it really comes from a lived experience. So it kind of goes back to what we said about, like, authenticity. What's authentic for you? And, like, there's really no wrong answer. There's just what's authentic for you. there's no wrong way to show up in how to serve.
As long as it's authentic, that's the thing. So my reason for bringing this up is because I think that we get out of authentic relationship with ourselves, right? And so, an IFS therapist is a great aid in getting back into that authentic relationship with self, so that we can recognize our real needs and attend to them.
Yes.
And then we're available for others.
Then we're available for others. Exactly. Yeah. We've
I've got
filled our cup sufficiently. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I just want to continue with what we started here, which is my question: what gets in the way of recognizing the needs of others? And your answer was, when I don't get my own needs met first, my capacity is diminished. I can't even see the needs of others. Certainly, even if I saw them, I wouldn't have the capacity to do anything about that.
That's right.
That kind of what I heard?
Yep.
Well, the next part of it, and I just want to acknowledge too that we probably only have about 5 minutes before I need to wrap up, because I have a group session soon. Is the question, what are the benefits then as a leader? What are the benefits of recognizing the needs of others? And now, as you stated it, having the capacity to do something about it.
Oh, well, the first thing that shows up or comes up when you say that is, if I recognize that I may not be the best venue to serve in that moment, then I can delegate it to someone who is. So, and Bill, you and I have done this before, where we've kind of delegated to each other, right? Because we recognize that we have different and unique skill sets that can serve differently.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about community, is that we can take turns sharing our unique and diverse skill sets. And again, it's authentic.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm hearing is recognizing the needs of others means recognizing your own needs, but also recognizing your limitations and your capacity to be able to be there.
Yep.
Once you've recognized those needs. And as a leader, or someone that might be led by a leader who recognizes my needs and then responsibly responds to it by either delegating it or addressing it to the best of their knowledge, that builds trust, and it goes back to that again, that attunement. Yeah.
Attunement and trust. And really, what I've noticed about great leaders is that they're quite good at delegating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that they don't get overwhelmed.
They don't get overwhelmed, and they recognize they've kind of cultivated a environment of skill sets in their life. And like, kind of like building a house. Okay, the plumber here, the electrician, and you've got all your trades in life, and you can share the load.
Yes. Marty, do you have any burning questions? Or they don't have to be on fire, but do you have any questions, additional questions for Islena?
No, I don't. I've very much enjoyed the conversation, and I thank you for that.
I heard you say, Islena, that you would suck at corporate leadership, and I want to challenge that a little bit.
Okay.
I doubt that you have your CV or resume out there looking for a leadership position in a corporation. However, if it were the right corporation, if it was a corporation whose missions and values were aligned with some of these qualities of self, like transparency, connection, attunement, trust, and service, I think you'd make a fine corporate leader. And
Thank you for saying that.
I think I'm inspired to say that for a couple of reasons. One, because I feel like it's true. But secondly, although we don't have a huge audience yet, I think that any corporate leader that was attracted to this coaching leadership podcast would probably be in a corporation like the one I just described, or would want to be.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Bill, because I wouldn't want corporate leaders who are listening to think, oh, that's hippie talk and doesn't right?
Yeah, I agree. And the irony, Bill, I'm so glad you said that. My partner actually said the same thing to me. He said, you'd make an amazing corporate leader if you just found the right corporation.
Yeah.
And I was surprised to hear it, surprised and not surprised, because I do understand how organizations are structured, right? And the kind of support that is needed for organizations. So you're right. Let's take the labels off and just tend to the needs. And if we fit them, great. And if we don't, we can delegate.
I love that you said if I found the right corporation, because found, I heard both ways.
Mm.
Ah, wow. The founder. We're speaking to the founder.
Nice. Nice.
Anything
That's
else
awesome.
you'd like to share with us or with the listening audience, Islena? Oh, well, let me let you answer that question, and I've got one more thing to add.
I just want to thank you guys for creating a space and a community to have great conversations and inspiring conversations.
You're welcome. It's our pleasure, and I really, really appreciate you coming on the show. We'd like to make sure that people know how to contact you. You've said some amazing things here. You've kind of demonstrated who you are to some degree, and I know that you serve by helping clients through IFS. So can you say just a little bit more about who you work with, how you help them, and how they might find you?
Okay. The easiest way to find me is on my website or on my socials, and my website has my socials. So onboardyoga.com is the easiest way. And I would say I've been teaching yoga the longest out of my sort of, I guess you could say, career. And I started with actually community and family development, working in nonprofit community-based organizations in the San Francisco East Bay as a young adult. So I kind of came in working with community and then families, and then did one-on-one work with teaching people how to become yoga teachers. And then that one-on-one work became internal with the internal families. So I love how it's gone from big to little, and now it might go from little to who knows, right?
Mhm.
So you can find me there. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you again for joining us. You've been a wonderful guest. Thanks so much for your time. And by the way,
Thank
thanks
you.
for having me on your podcast. That's
Yeah, that was
what,
fun.
a year and a half ago. What a wonderful, fun conversation that was as well.
Full circle.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, until next
Thanks,
time.
guys. Yeah, till next time. Take care. Thanks again.
Thank you for listening to Leadership Coaching, where we help you learn to lead with confidence and compassion.
If you enjoyed listening, please share it. Don't miss a single episode. To subscribe and to get show notes, visit leadershipcoachingpodcast.com.